Hello guys, this is Dark Fox Sage 2 and we are back with our new fanfic, which is What If Naruto Learned Puppet Art from Sasori Demon with Puppet Hands Part 2. And if you enjoy this fanfic, then please press the like button and please subscribe to the channel. It motivates me to upload more fanfic like these for you all. Now let's start the fanfiction. Naruto wasn't used to having so many damn people around him. He felt like ripping his head off with all these women walking around, flirting with him, hitting on him, trying to sleep with him. You'd think a former sex slave wouldn't want to have sex ever again, but obviously, they were addicted to it or something. There was devoted, and then there was just freaky. Luckily, Hato kept them away at most of the time. Otherwise he would have killed them. At the moment, he was underneath the compound, where he'd built a massive chamber full of parts and equipment to build his more massive puppets. Naruto came out of the compartment inside the one puppet within the room. It was a monstrous thing, a masterpiece, for which he created 2,000 clones every day to work on it. At the rate it was going, it would be finished just in time for the Chunin exam's final event. He smiled at the prospect as he left the chamber. He used the elevator to climb up to the original construction room, 2 floors combined into one, with 500 clones working on building the pieces for his latest battle puppet, as well as the 3 new non-battle and the new long-range battle puppets series. He walked over to the center construct and took a shower, before getting dressed and heading to the Hokage's office. He met Gaara and Haku along the way. Haku and Gaara had hit it off pretty well, but when Naruto showed the ice user the body of Zabuza, it didn't have the desired effect. Naruto expected him to either be happy the oppressor was gone, or to get mad and demand it was destroyed. However, Haku merely pointed out that it was ironic Zabuza became Naruto's new tool after using Haku as his for so long, before going back to his training. The 3 ninja arrived at the council room, where they bowed to the council. The civilian half of the council hated Naruto, as well as the Hokage's old teammates, Danzo, and the Uchiha, but he didn't care. He was more worried about his puppet collection. "Ah, Naruto, Gaara, Haku, so good to see you again," the Hokage said in a voice he used just to get on the Naruto haters' nerves. "I have a new mission for you 3. But you'll have to separate from each other." The 3 team members glanced at each other. Naruto nodded to them before stepping forward slightly. What would this mission's objective to be? "Well," Sarutobi said, "several teams of genin will be arriving soon for the Chunin exams which are being held in Konoha this year. We simply need each of you to escort one of these teams here. Naruto, you will be going to Kumo to escort the genin team they are entering." Naruto considered this. He had a set of maps that detailed where prominent shinobi he could turn into puppets lived, and several of them were on the way to Kumo. "I will gladly accept the mission, Lord Hokage." "Haku," the Hokage said, turning to the newest member of the team, "I need you to go to the land of rice and escort a group of sound genin and their sensei. Do you accept?" "I accept, Lord Hokage," Haku said, without a moment's hesitation. "And finally, Gaara, I need you to go to Suna to escort the children of the Kazekage, their teammate, their sensei, and the Kazekage himself." Gaara's eyes narrowed. Sarutobi's grip on the scroll was so tight his knuckles had turned white. He didn't assign who went where, that was the council's doing. And naturally, they did something like this. "I will gladly accept," Gaara said, much to the shock of all in the room. "But only on the condition that if I am provoked, I cannot be held responsible for whatever may happen." "Request granted, Gaara. You are hereby qualified to use lethal force if you deem it necessary," the Hokage stated as he threw the scroll to Naruto. "Be back within 2 weeks. Oh, and I have word from Kakashi in Wave. It seems the village has already chosen a name for the bridge even though it isn't finished." The 3-man team waited on bated breath. "They are calling it the Great Naruto Bridge." The blonde snorted before they exited the building. Naruto stopped at the complex to grab one of the finished puppets in his newest non-battle puppet series, a massive mole puppet the size of a wagon with 4 horses pulling it that civilians often used to transport goods, with a giant drill on the front. The back opened up and he could get inside. He unsealed it outside of the village, and when he opened it, he revealed a complex computer array, with a comfortable-looking chair in front of it. A mini fridge was built in, and 2 screens, one for viewing what was going on outside of the transportation puppet, the other for watching TV, were attached to the wall in front of the screen. How is this a puppet and not a machine? Haku asked as Naruto climbed in. It's powered by earth and fire chakra that was borrowed from some unknowing benefactors. The drill is powered by a seal set underneath it that pushes wind chakra into it, spinning it. The earth chakra makes the larger boulders move aside as well as the passage easier. The fire chakra gives bursts of speed, or melts through rocks the earth chakra can't move. I control its movements though, but I use the computer and its limited battery for when I need rest. He explained right before the top closed. I'll see you in 2 weeks. I have to get several corpses and I won't be able to use this to get back. Good luck, he said through a speaker on the outside, right before the puppet dove into the earth beneath them. Gaara, Haku said as he and the Jinchuriki began to separate. Do you really intend to kill your family? Only if I am provoked, he said. Then he disappeared down the road. Haku sighed before turning and dashing down the road leading to the land of rice. Scene change. Naruto surveyed the carnage before him. His puppets had made quick work of the village where 5 of his newest puppets were residing. Each of them had the ability to control an element with great skill, a Kekkei Genkei of legend, and with them, he wouldn't have to take elemental chakra from sleeping ninja. Of course he would have to make major repairs to all of puppets, and his chakra coils still burned from the amount of red chakra he had to draw on to kill them. But for now he had to wrap up business in this village. He moved to the last remaining building, the largest building in the village in fact. The orphanage. He kicked open the door and entered. The woman in charge of the orphans had died, when one of the men's attacks had missed and ripped her heart out. So now, 30 orphans were left without a caretaker. Naruto, being an orphan, couldn't stand this. So, he focused most of his chakra into a single clone, so it would last a whole week before dispersing. As the clone looked around, he was talking to the orphans. Hello there little boys and girls, he said in a happy voice. The orphans came out of hiding and gathered around him. I'm sorry about all this, I know you probably want to stay here. No, we don't, a small boy said. The people were always mean to us. We hate it here. Naruto smiled at the boy. Well, you don't have to worry about that. You see, I live in the village of Konoha, and I own a giant house. And my brother here, he said, gesturing to the clone, is going to take you back to the house, so you can live there. There are lots of people there who will take care of you. Would you like that? The orphans nodded and Naruto stood up, still smiling. Well, that's good, he said. I'm a ninja, and I'm on a mission, so I have to stay away from the house for 2 weeks, but when I get back, I'll make sure I bring back enough money to get each of you a new wardrobe, toys, you each get your own room. I'll get you whatever you want. The orphans yelled in excitement as Naruto left, leaving his clone to take care of them. He climbed into the transportation puppet, casting a genjutsu over the carnage outside, and left, leaving his clone to take the kids back. Scene change. Haku was watching the men carefully. He was still wearing his girl clothes, and the bandits were surrounding him, thinking he was a girl, wanting to rape him. To either side of him was forest, behind the bandits was mountains, and behind him was a lake. He would make these fools pay. Hey boys, looks like we got ourselves a new toy. Can't wait to play with it all night long. Let's get to it, I'm getting impatient. Come here girly, we won't hurt you much. The bandits laughed at the joke. Haku snorted before back-flipping 20 feet and landing on the water. The girl's a ninja, the leader shouted. Yes, I am a ninja, Haku said as he ran through hand seals. And I'm not a girl. A second later, a massive pillar of water rose up into the air behind Haku and arced over him, swallowing the men. Haku froze the water, and the men inside it. He jumped over them, racing towards the mountains, only stopping to snap and watch in satisfaction as the orb of water containing the men exploded into thousands of shards. Scene change. Gaara hated the desert. That's a weird thing for a container of Shukaku, but it was true. The desert reminded him of his mother, his uncle, and his father. It was a dreadful place for him. One night, he was walking down the road when a pack of coyotes appeared. They circled him, snarling, but he just kept walking. As the first coyote jumped forward, Gaara raised his hand and the sand of the desert rose up, forming Shukaku's arm, and crushed the coyote. He swirled the sand around him, obliterating the animals with a brutality fit for his tenant. As he walked down the road a few minutes later, an idea occurred to him, a way to scare Suna as payback for what they did to him, and as a reminder to what could happen one day. As day broke, the village was in a stage 10 alert. Because, marching towards them on the horizon was the Shukaku no Ikibi. The very demon they had sealed into the cage's sun 13 years ago. Scene change. Naruto patted the scroll at his side gleefully. Inside were two of Kumo's most valuable possessions. The village's forbidden scroll and the legendary mountain lion summoning contract. Of course, his four companions didn't know about this little find. After all, they were a full day's run from the village already. So, the leader of the team, Yugito Ni, and the Jinchuriki for the two-tailed cat, the Nibi, said suddenly, "You're really a Jinchuriki as well." Naruto nodded, studying the girl. She was dressed in a pair of black ninja pants, with a gray shirt on. Her blonde hair was tied into a ponytail going down her back. I contain the Kyuubi no Kitsune. Or Fluffers, as I like to call him. Suddenly, the team's sensei, Killer Bee, Jinchuriki to the eight-tailed Ushi-Oni, a giant ox with 8 octopus tentacles, fell on the ground laughing. "What's so funny, Bee?" Naruto asked, his voice laced with malice. "I'm sorry," he said as he climbed back to his feet. It's not every day you hear someone call the greatest demon and most fearsome of the Biju Fluffers." He fell back over, laughing and rolling on the ground. Naruto sighed. Somehow, he knew that this was going to be a long journey. Scene change. Haku bowed to the three genin and their sensei. "Hello, my name is Haku. I will be escorting you to Konoha." "Yeah, whatever." One of the team members, a spiky-haired kid with tubes in his arms that could fire concentrated blasts of sound, as Haku had already found out, said dismissively. His sensei smacked him on the back of the head. "Show some respect, fool. The Hokage has seen fit to send one of his personal ninja to collect you. Don't make a bad impression." The man hissed. He was dressed in normal Junin clothes, with his black hair tied into a ponytail down his back. His skin was very pale, but not too pale, meaning he most likely worked in the shadows a lot. Haku was very suspicious of these people. And that would in the end make this a very long journey. Scene change. The cage stared at the massive form of the Shukaku heading towards the village, the sirens wailing behind him. His robes fluttered in the wind and his cage hat had blown off, but he wasn't worried about that. What he was staring at was what was on the head of the creature. It was one of the personal ninja of the Hokage, and his son, Gaara. "Am I finally worthy of you, father?" he yelled, loud enough for all of the village to hear. "Have I finally proven to you how useful I could have been? Proved that you were wrong to throw me away like a broken blade?" The cage drew his signature weapon, a staff with two menacing spear heads on each end that could shoot out on long cables and have wind chakra focused through them, allowing them to tear through anything. He rushed forward, using the extendable cables to climb up one of the Shukaku legs. Spikes shot out of the leg, smaller versions of the legs extended, trying to swallow him whole, but somehow he managed to break through all of these, finally reaching the top. He and Gaara stared at each other, each waiting for the other to make the first move. In the end, It was the cage who did it first. Gaara, he said, spinning the weapon and planting it in the nose of the monstrous creation. My youngest son, I am truly sorry. Sorry that you let the Konoha shinobi take me away, that you let me grow powerful, that I was born at all. Like I give a flying shit what you think. As far as I'm concerned, you can go to hell. Gaara snapped and the weapon the cage had so boldly set aside was sucked under the sand. Sand erupted up from all sides and engulfed the cage in a sphere of sand, much like a massive pimple on the face of the sand demon. Gaara began to squeeze his hand closed, when the sand exploded outwards. A miniature cyclone spun around his father, ripping apart the sand that came close to him, as well as levitating him in the air. Let me finish, Gaara. I'm sorry. I'm sorry that I never told you that I love you, my son. Scene change. Naruto had one last stop to make before they returned to Konoha, and he let the team he was escorting know this. Why do we have to stop at this village? Asked Yugito, who Naruto had quickly found out was as curious as any cat. There is a man here who has something I want and need. I'm simply going to take it from him by any means necessary. Naruto explained as he searched the faces of the crowd. His contact had told him that the fool would be around here someplace. Ah, here he is, putting on a show like an idiot. The green-haired man was dressed in the Junin garbs of the Hidden Rain village. He was escorting 3 genin to the Chunin exams, his genin teams obviously, but he wasn't being discreet. He was fending off a massive brute of a man with what Naruto came to get, the legendary sword of the Nadaime Hokage, the Raijin no Ken. The blade was bright yellow, made of pure electricity. The Nadaime had used it to increase the strength of his water attacks. Naruto unsealed Mizuki, turning the man into his demon form. He sent a large chakra pulse into the puppet, and vines shot out, racing through the air above the crowd and stabbing through the brute and the Junin holding the blade. The vines lifted both up into the air and brought them both to Naruto. He took the Raijin out of the Junin's hand before cutting off his head and sealing it away. He was a missing nin of Konoha after all, and Naruto could use the money. Then he had the vines toss the bodies into the air before the blonde sent a massive stream of fire into the sky, burning the bodies to ashes. Okay, he said, turning to the group of ninja he was escorting while shoving the Raijin into his pocket. Shall we get moving then? Scene change. Haku hated this mission. It was official. The genin were attacking him with rapid, unorganized attacks, which scrutinized and weakened each other. Not only that, but even though Haku had told them he was an ice user, they had decided to attack him by a massive lake of all places. So he was circling in the air high above them on a platform of ice. The genin were sending attacks his way, but none were reaching him. Finally, the kid with the tubes in his arms, Zaku, pointed the barrels to the ground and blasted himself into the air with a burst of sound. He flew towards Haku at an amazing speed, but the ice user simply jumped backwards. What he didn't expect was for Zaku to pass him in height and point his barrels towards him. Haku could see the massive burst of sound building up in his palms. Thinking quickly, he pulled up as much water as he could from the lake below, blocking the attack. Zaku began to descend, thinking he'd hit Haku, only for the boy to come flying towards him. On the head of a massive ice dragon. Scene change. Gaara's hold on the sand began to weaken. How many times had he dreamed of hearing his father say those words? How many times had he drifted off into daydreams, thinking of reuniting with his family? And here was his chance. As he lowered himself and his father to the ground, the Shukaku fell apart, creating a massive pile of sand that quickly blew away. Gaara walked into the village with his father, who wanted him to tell him everything that had happened since the 2 years he had been gone. As he proceeded through the village, he met an elderly woman whom he knew very well in the sense of reputation. She was short, with gray hair tied in a bun, dressed in the clothes of a very respected elder. This was Lady Chiyo, the one who had sealed the Shukaku into him all those years ago. She was also one of Naruto's idols, being the grandmother and teacher of Sasori. Yes, I have heard of the child, she said when Gaara asked about Naruto. What of him? Gaara considered what he was about to ask carefully, before finally asking, would you come to Konoha and train him in the more advanced forms of puppetry? Scene change. 2 weeks had passed quickly. Haku had beaten the shit out of the Sound Genin until they followed his orders. Naruto had 5 new powerful puppets, several valuable pieces of equipment that would aid him in the construction of his later puppets, and Gaara was reunited with his family, also bringing back one of Naruto's idols. When they met at the crossroad, Naruto had dropped to his knees in front of the woman. Lady Chiyo, I am an aspiring puppeteer, and I would be incredibly honored if you would teach me. I am respectful, as well as diligent. If you take me under your wing, I will not disappoint you. The old woman tapped her chin a few times before nodding. Show me all of your puppets. Naruto nodded before unsealing Quicksilver, the 2 Uchiha, the 2 Hyuga, the 2 Kagaya, Mizuki, the Sealing Series, the Mole Puppet, Desolation, Retribution, and Genocide. She examined each one of the normal puppets, but when she saw the human puppets, she stared at him in shock. How do you know how to create these things? I found the training room of your grandson, he said honestly. I learned a great deal, but I need more advanced instruction to become the best puppeteer in the world. Chiyo nodded slowly before looking at all of the puppets again, this time with a more critical eye. She nodded her head as he sealed them back up. You are quite good at creating interesting puppets. But most of them rely on the ruthless power. You use elemental chakra a lot, as well as showing most, if not all, of your puppets' weapons quickly. But these are your older puppets, are your first of a series. Do you have a sketch pad with the plans for your other, more complex puppets? She and Naruto began walking together towards the compound. The older puppeteer was flipping through the sketch pads Naruto had given and making hand gesture while pointing out several things to the blonde. Whatever she was saying obviously pleased Naruto, because he was actually smiling. The sight freaked out several civilians because they ran off screaming in random directions. Scene change. Naruto was showing Lady Chiyo the massive constructs in the underground chamber. She was marveling at the complexity of the puppet, as well as the way he intended to control it once it was activated. When will this be done? The woman asked as they rode up the elevator, watching the thousands of clones working diligently. 2 days before the Chunin exams finals at the most. Why do you ask? The blonde inquired as he bent down to help a clone with a particularly difficult project. No wonder, it just seemed like such an undertaking would last longer. She said. After all, you told me it took you 4 years to perfect genocide. Yes, but that was mainly because I was doing it all by myself, without the help of the shadow clone jutsu, which I didn't know at the time, and I had to find suppliers who would sell me the best quality parts and not ask questions, and usually they had to be imported, so I had to save up a lot of money. He explained as he scribbled down a couple of things for his clones to consider with the transportation puppets. He took Chiyo through the puppets the rest of the day, answering questions, asking his own, going into detail on each puppet. Then they came to his most groundbreaking puppet design of all, one far behind the schedule he had set up for it in fact. Naruto, why are you attempting something like this? Chiyo asked as she stared at the designs. Well, all the best puppeteers in history have made some kind of groundbreaking movement. You made puppets that can use gears to deliver messages, as well as developing a way to control humans like puppets. Sasori found a way to make humans into puppets and still retain their chakra. This is my project. But I need a more advanced grasp of seals before I can properly finish it. As he ran her through each and every step of each and every project, Chiyo couldn't help but think of Sasori and the way he used to be, before he defected from the village. Then they came upon Naruto's prized piece of armor. It was small, fitting inside her hand. She opened it up and was surprised to see nothing but a storage seal. She reached down to touch it, making Naruto's eyes widen, but before he could say anything, she had focused chakra into it and the seal's content was expelled. A massive scroll with a seal running around all the edges appeared. It was filled with hundreds of different seals. Protection seals, chakra seals, conversion seals, attack seals, expelling seals, deflecting seals, and around the edge was a combination of an anchoring and fusing seal, allowing the massive scroll's content to work from within the tiny storage seal. Naruto quickly shoved it back into the seal though before she could properly examine it, exhaling in relief. Be more careful, Lady Chio. It's booby-trapped so that the scroll explodes 15 seconds after being exposed to air. He said, handing her back the device. She looked at the seals around the edge, as well as the diagram of the seals he was going to add to it later on, the function of the object, a piece so crucial the whole device would be rendered useless without it, and a single word written under the phrase application. That single word was Tsunade. What do you need with Tsunade? She asked as she gently set the piece of puppet armor on the ground. The installation will be incredibly dangerous, and will require amazing medical skill. Tsunade is the only person with enough skill to do the application, and even she might get it wrong. But this is the only thing I can think of to control all of my puppets at once without doing something as crazy as turning myself into a human puppet. I intend to seek her out after the Chunin exams. Scene change. A week later, Team 7 returned back from Wave. Naruto was surprised to say the least when Hanabi arrived on his doorstep that night, with her sister Hinata and her cousin Neji. Can I help you with something? He asked the Hyuga. Yeah, you can dumbass. Hanabi yelled. Since it's all your fault, we're going to be living with you for now on. Naruto rubbed his temples. He already had over 80 people living with him. If they moved in, he would have to buy more of the surrounding apartment buildings and, wait, why are they moving in? Why are you moving in? Well, Hanabi crossed her arms and tapped her foot in concentration. Then she launched into an explanation. Flashback. Hanabi was standing before the entire Hyuga clan. She had told her father that she had learned a style of Hyuga fighting that would rock the clan to its core. What she hadn't realized was that he was in a council meeting at the time. Now every Hyuga was being ordered to watch her demonstrate. She glared at her cousin Neji, who smiled superiorly as the Junin referee ordered them to begin. Neji lunged forward and tried to deliver a palm strike, but instead of flesh, his palm hit a shield, made entirely of chakra. Hanabi swung her other arm around, which had a chakra katana on the end, and tried to swipe at her cousin, but he nimbly stepped back, avoiding each strike. Hanabi lunged forward, forming chakra into every chakra node and shifting it into the desired shape. She flew through the air, a massive chakra sword forming around her as she spun. Neji dropped into a stance that shocked most, if not all, of the clan. 8 trigrams, 64 palms. He yelled as the ground beneath him turned into a green and black yin and yang sign. His hands flew as he called out his attacks, and each time Hanabi's chakra sword would flicker for a moment and lose some of its substance. Hanabi skidded to a stop and jumped forward, onto a beam, and up onto the ceiling, which she ran across, straight towards Neji. She jumped down in front of him, spinning as she did so. 8 trigrams. Chakra Ray Shuriken rotation. The dome of chakra surrounded her as she fell towards Neji, who had a similar surprise up his sleeve. 8 trigrams. Rotation. He yelled back, forming the same ball around himself. The two orbs connected with each other, only Hanabi's was more deadly, sending out shuriken made of chakra in every direction. The two prodigies were sent away from each other as the two chakras collided. Before they could go at it again, Hiashi appeared between them. Enough, both of you. He turned to Hanabi first. Where did you learn the technique of the first Hyuga? I learned it from Naruto Uzumaki. She said quietly. And you, he said, turning to Neji, who taught you the 64 palms? I figured it out myself. Neji barked. Normally he would never do this, but his little cousin had just humiliated him. In front of the whole damn clan. Hiyashi, the oldest elder on the council, said. You know the punishment for such crimes. Hiyashi lowered his head and nodded. Hanabi, Neji, you are both hereby banished from the clan. What? Father, don't you think why you're being a bit unfair? Hinata asked. Hiyashi's eyes narrowed. Are you questioning my judgment, girl? No, I was just saying. Well, if you think I'm being unfair, how about this? You are banished as well. Pack your things and be gone within the hour. And Neji, your caged bird seal will be removed. Be in the sealing chamber in 5 minutes. End flashback. So it's my fault you didn't heed a warning I gave you? Naruto asked Hanabi. The Hyuga ground her teeth before pushing him to the side. We are either moving in, or painting. Naruto was here, in neon orange letters on the Hokage monument. She and Naruto locked gazes for a second, before he opened up the door and let them in. Honestly, it surprised them when they found out Naruto had let the former sex slaves he had freed from the Kagaya live with him, and then let 30 orphans move in with him. And of course the sheer amount of puppets running around the place was astronomical. I only have 2 rules. Naruto told them. 1. Never enter the south or east tower. I make seals and puppets in these towers. And 2. He turned to them with a glare so full of malicious intent and horrible ideas he could use for punishment for breaking the most sacred rule in his household: don't ever touch my ramen or my ramen flavored Pocky. The 3 other genin face planted as Naruto walked away calmly. Scene change. Gaara was sipping from a cup of tea when they sat down on either side of him. One girl, with 4 pigtails and a massive fan on her back, and one boy, dressed in a black outfit with a wrapped bundle, obviously a puppet, tied to his back. These were his siblings, Kankuro and Tamari. Damn it. Kankuro hissed as he also ordered a glass of tea. Everyone in the damn village instantly knew it was a puppet on my back thanks to that Uzumaki kid. I'm going to have to rely on more than just surprise. Luckily I have a great puppet. He said happily. No, you don't, Gaara said, shocking his older brother. Naruto was taught, indirectly, by Sasori of the Red Sand. He's been creating original puppets since he was 8. He has several revolutionary projects happen at this very instant inside his puppet building tower. Even I would be hard-pressed to kill him if I was really trying to do so. Tamari and Kankuro looked at each other. This would be a perfect way to learn all about their future opponent in the Chunin exams. Well, no one knew what my fan was for. I use it to amplify my wind-style jutsu. No way the brat could meet me in that area. He has 5 Ginta human puppets, one of which controls wind. He said, referring to the legendary clan that had just recently started to make a comeback when 5 children were born with their infamous bloodline. Not only that, but he created a relatively simply jutsu that allows him to form the air beneath him into a solid state, clamp it around his legs to keep himself stationary, and fly at his will. You two will most likely be massacred if you try to face him at all, because he is like no ordinary puppeteer. He uses taijutsu, ninjutsu, and low-level genjutsu if he's bored, to wipe away anyone who gets too close. Of course, if I was to elaborate what I've been saying, instead of just give you the gist, it would take hours, days even. But I must be off, he said, disappearing in a swirl of sand and leaving 40 empty cups of tea for his brother and sister to pay for. Scene change. Itachi arrived back in Konoha at that exact moment. And as soon as he did, he reported 3 things to the council. Honorable council members, I have 3 grave pieces of news. He spoke. Every eye in the council was looking at him, every ear listening intently. First, my father has sent me to Kiri recently to hire Mei and Fubi Terumi to assassinate Naruto Uzumaki and Gaara of the Sand. The council started to mutter. While they didn't like the 2 Jinchuriki, they were both feared and admired, and gave the village better standing. If they were wiped out by assassins from Kiri, the village would look weak. Second, I met Lord Jiraiya on my travels back. I told me to let you know he has found out that Orochimaru and his Sound Village, as well as Kumo, have formed an alliance and are going to try to destroy Konoha during the final phases of the Chunin exams. Now the council was talking and yelling moderately at each other. However, before it escalated, Itachi piped in his plan. But, I have made a very detailed map of all the bandit camps within 200 miles of Konoha. There are hundreds of them, and I believe Naruto Uzumaki can capture them, turn them into human puppets and use them to defend the wall of Konoha the same way he defends his own compound. The council members nodded, seeing this as a smart solution. And finally, and most grave of all, Orochimaru has had one of his spies warn my father. And after the invasion, if it fails, which it will if we plan correctly, my entire clan is planning a coup to destroy the council. The sound of the yells of anger echoed in the large chamber, until Itachi raised a finger in the air. But, I will gladly destroy the ninja of the clan. I will not hurt the civilians or the children. But I will need help on this. From the Hokage's 3 personal ninja. Scene change. Haku was in the underground lake that provided the water for Naruto's compound. It also supplied the electricity, as well as a variety of other things. One of those was being the perfect practice spot for Haku's new jutsu. He stepped off of the water, panting but smiling, and snapped his fingers. Instantaneously, the top layer of water, which he had turned to ice, exploded back into water and fell into the lake. He pulled some of the water up and washed himself off by pulling himself through a wall of water, before pushing the impurities from the water and going back upstairs. What he found was a spectacle. Naruto had the 2 massive scrolls containing all the supplies he had taken from Gato's base out, with all the girls, the Hyuga, and orphans gathered around. He unrolled the scroll and had everyone move back before unsealing the pile, piece by piece. He had several smaller storage scrolls waiting to put weapons into, which he did. There were so many weapons in fact, that he had to send one of the girls out to buy 20 more and there was barely enough space. He handed the 146 scrolls to a number of clones, which took them to the weapons tower. Then he got to bodies. He was brutal when it came to the kids' training, so he had shown them how he made human puppets. A few of them got sick afterwards, but they held out until the end. So when Naruto began unsealing the bodies of dead ninja, they didn't care. Well, the bodies of several lost Kekkei Genkai holders, the bodies of the founder of several smaller but prominent villages, and enough heads to turn into buy all of the slums and turn them into a personal fortress. Gato must have paid several fortunes getting these. He said, the glee evident in his eyes. Then he unsealed the remaining 16 scrolls, all bigger than most of the orphans. Naruto, one of the orphans, Hachi, asked, what are those things? All of the grown-ups are looking at them like it's an endless supply of ramen or something. Naruto smiled. He liked Hachi because he was as addicted to ramen as he was. The boy had short orange hair, another admirable quality, and was dressed in black pants and a white shirt that had Naruto's signature swirl on the front. These are summoning contracts Hachi, very rare ones, for several powerful animals. And a ninja can become very famous when he has a summoning contract. Naruto blinked for a second. Wasn't Hachi just in front of him? He turned and smiled as the boy dug through the scrolls, until he finally resurfaced with one in hand yelling, I call this one. Naruto went over to him and picked it up, his eyebrows raising up slightly. This is the canine contract. It lets you summon any type of canine, if you have enough chakra, which means dogs, wolves, foxes, hyena, anything in the canine family. Naruto flipped it over carefully. Mind if I use it to Hachi? Of course not, Naruto. You're my big brother. I'll share it with you whenever I want. He said, wrapping his arms around Naruto's waist. He stared at the boy in shock. He patted him on the back and returned the hug. The girls all let out a group, ah, as Naruto picked up the little kid and carried him back to the other children. He put the canine contract to the side for the moment and focused on the other 15 scrolls. That means that each contract could be signed by 4 girls, max, for it to be even. Alright, we have bulls, cats, ravens, weasels, boars, bears, bats, blue jays, mockingbirds, raccoons, tigers, scorpions, crows, vultures, and of course, moth. I also obtained the mountain lion contract recently. Choose the contract you want, if you want one at all, but no more than 4 people per scroll. He said, picking up the canine scroll before opening his book on how to use the summoning technique. He unrolled it and bit his thumb, signing his name in blood before leaving a handprint on the space below it. Then he unrolled the scroll till he found the hand seals for this species summoning. Naruto is happy with the results of his wave adventure. Now all he had to do was find a safe place for the scroll until Hachi was old enough to use it. He smiled before pushing the scroll into the seal holding Kyuubi. The seal would hang on the wall in his mindscape, escaping all harm until ready to use again. Naruto patted Hachi once more on the head before going back to his puppet building. Scene change. Orochimaru was tapping his fingers on the desk in the hotel room assigned to him and his 3 genin to stay in during the Chunin exams. Apparently, there was a leak in his security somewhere, because Jiraiya had known about the invasion. He was confident his agents could keep the old pervert out of the village long enough to stop him from telling the Hokage in time to slow him down. Lord Orochimaru, one of his subordinates said, bowing both of his heads to him. Sakin and Ukin were 2 of Orochimaru's most elite ninja team members, or 1 member since they were fused together most of the time. We have managed to get a message to Kabuto telling him to try and find out the village's defense plans for the invasion, but nothing has come back yet. Thank you, Sakin. You are dismissed, Orochimaru said quietly before the 2-headed ninja disappeared in a flash of light. It had come to his attention that the Uchiha clan was planning a coup, and that the council wanted to destroy the clan. Naruto Uzumaki would help Itachi with the attack, and most likely turn the ninja into his puppets, which Orochimaru couldn't have. So how could he stop them? Move the invasion up? No, that wouldn't work. Hire assassins? No, that had already been proven useless. So there were only 2 things to do now. Either kill Naruto, or plant the curse seal on him. Scene change. Naruto, Gaara, and Haku were sitting in front of the Hokage, with an enrollment sheet for the Chunin exams in each of their hands. Well, it seems that technically you 3 are still genin, so I have to enroll you in the Chunin exams. I'll be considered your sensei, so if and when you pass the second part, I will spend a month training the 3 of you. The 3 genin stared at each other in shock. But I thought once you became a Kage, you couldn't take on a genin team. Haku asked. Of course not. My team and I were taught by the Nadaime after all. What would give you that idea? Haku simply shrugged his shoulders in embarrassment. Well, fill out those forms and take them to room 301 by noon tomorrow. I expect great things from you 3. Now go prepare. Treat this as a 5-day mission. Yes, sir, Lord Hokage. They all yelled. Naruto exploded into golden fire, Gaara disappeared in a miniature sandstorm, and Haku suddenly froze solid and exploded into thousands of ice crystals, each with his image in them. Next day, Naruto and his team walked down the hallway of the academy. They stared at the massive crowd of students gathering around a room, with 2 boys, obviously Azumo and Kokotsu, blocking the door. What the fools didn't realize was that the sign saying 301 was actually room 201. They walked past, starting to head up the doors, when someone yelled, "You're all idiots. It's a genjutsu." Naruto, Gaara, and Haku turned to see Hanabi Hyuga smacking her pink-haired teammate in the back of the head and Sasuke glaring daggers at her. Moron, Hanabi yelled. It was supposed to root out the weaklings. Sakura had the dignity to blush as the ninja outside the door began to head for the stairs, only for 3 clones of Naruto, Haku, and Gaara each appeared, blocking the entrance. You fools will only get killed in the Chunin exams if you can't see through a simple genjutsu, or count for that reason. Only those who see through the genjutsu get to go up the stairs. Kokutsu, Azumo, the first Naruto clone said, put the genjutsu back up, and over us as well. Anyone who tries to get past will have their throats slit. The clone drew two kunai and glared at the crowd. Ha! A 16-year-old, much taller than Naruto, Genin yelled. A simple illusion won't stop me. And he ran forward. The shadow clone sighed before jumping forward, his hands flashing. The Genin fell over dead, his throat slit. I'm a Junin level clone. Substantial. Luckily, this was a clone as well. The boy went up in two puffs of smoke, one revealing him to be a second clone of Naruto, the other dispersing him. The genin that hadn't seen through the genjutsu groaned as people went up the stairs, but they weren't allowed to. The real Naruto, Gaara, and Haku were just walking up the stairs with Sasuke, Sakura, and Hanabi, when they met Kiba, Hinata, Shino, Ino, Shikamaru, and Choji. The two teams were waiting outside the door, talking to each other. Hey, the gang's all here. Oh, and who's this delicate flower? Kiba asked as he ogled Haku. This is Haku. I didn't know you were gay, Kiba. Naruto answer. What? I'm not gay. Well, you showed interest in Haku, who is a guy. That usually implies you're gay. Kiba fell back in repulsion as his classmates laughed at him. Speaking of which, Haku, go change into your new clothes. Naruto ordered. The ice user was not happy about it, but complies all the same. They spent the next 20 minutes talking, waiting for Haku to come back. When he finally did, he was dressed in pair of black pants with multiple pockets, a blue ninja shirt with fishnet underneath, and he had seals painted on his palms for storage. His hair was tied down a ponytail going down his back. Why'd you paint storage seals on your hand? Shino asked Haku. I'm an ice user, but I'm not at the level where I can draw moisture from the air, so I carry large amounts inside these waterproof seals Naruto made for me. Naruto's former classmates laughed. Naruto, make seals. Yeah right. Kiba barked. You need to be quiet, Kiba. Let me help you. Naruto's hands flashed and he pulled out a pot of ink and a brush. He painted a seal on Kiba's face and sent chakra into it. Kiba moved his jaw, trying to get his mouth up. He started pulling on his lip, but it wouldn't budge. It's an hour-long seal. Don't even try. Naruto, Haku, we should go in now. Gaara said. The blonde and brunette nodded before going into the classroom. Hundreds of genin were inside. As soon as they entered, every eye in the room moved to them. Naruto closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them again, a massive wave of killer intent flooded the room, making the other genin freeze up. What are you weaklings looking at? He growled. The other genin tore their eyes away. Who are you calling a weakling? Someone yelled. A genin from the village hidden in the moon, one of the few actually hidden villages, with a genjutsu cast on so it only appeared with the light of the moon, jumped into the air. He had black clothing, with spiky brown hair. In his hand was a staff, with a large saw on one end, and a normal spear tip on the end. The boy spun the staff around, setting it ablaze. Naruto snapped and without warning, two clones appeared in the air on either side of him and exploded. The boy was blown back across the room in an instant. That was an exploding shadow clone technique. You are lucky I'm in a good mood, or I would have used a poison shadow clone and killed you. Naruto stated before the three of them sat down at a table. A moment later, a Junin walked out, dressed in a black trench coat and a bandana over his head. Alright, settle down. The first test is about to begin. Scene change. Sasori nodded to his spy before sending him on his way. So, his hidden room in Suna had been found, and a boy was using the information in it to create a puppet army. This would be interesting to see. Sasori also knew that Orochimaru was planning on attacking Konoha soon. An evil idea occurred to him, a way to get back at the Snake Sanin. He quickly jotted down a note and summoned a messenger bird to take it to the boy. He would travel to Konoha and watch as Orochimaru was destroyed. Scene change. Naruto snorted at the easiness of the test. By simply putting the glasses down and sending out a small fly puppet with the ocular seal on, he passed. He used a minuscule amount of chakra so the string was invisible. He sent the fly to spy on Sakura, and copied down her answers before pulling the fly back to him and sealing it away. Ibiki wasn't fooled. After all, he had fought puppeteers before. It was an amazing technique really, but it left the puppeteer open for attacks if they got past the puppet. According to the Hokage, Naruto was going to overcome this weakness with some of the things he was creating. Yes, this boy had the making of the ninja that would put his life on the line to save an innocent, to protect a weakened comrade, to protect his village, and to serve his leader. Alright, time's up. Time for the final question. All ears were tuned into Ibiki. There are rules to the question. You can choose not to take it. And you can come back next year and try again. Or, you can choose to take the question. However, should you get the question wrong, you will be removed from your village's ninja roster, your chakra will be sealed away, and you will have your memory wiped clean. Several of the teams stood up and left then and there. Most of them in fact. However, there was still 72 ninja still in the room. Ibiki smiled. Congratulations, you all pass. Before anyone could say anything, Naruto suddenly dropped to the ground, yelling out, "Hit the deck." As he went, Gaara wrapped himself in a cocoon of sand, while Haku dove beneath the desk. A massive ball of cloth suddenly exploded through the window. It expanded, and two kunai pinned the banner to the ceiling. A woman, dressed in a tan mini skirt and jacket, with a fishnet shirt on, smiled at them. "Hey there, I'm Anko Mitarashi, and I'm the prompter of the second part of the Chunin exams, the Forest of Death Challenge." Several ninja gasped at the name alone, but Naruto wasn't worried. In fact, he was happy. The forest held several large animals, and he could use them to make puppets out of. Not only that, but he had seen several powerful-looking genin he was itching to turn into human puppets. This was why he had summoned the smallest of the Seals series puppets, a 1-inch tall thing that made the more detailed seals. He had it go around the room, painting tracking seals on the genin he wanted to take out, before returning it to him. After Anko had explained they had to get one type each of the two scrolls the instructors were giving out, they had been given a piece of paper that made it so the death of any genin wasn't the liability of Konoha. After his entire team had exchanged them, they had been given an Earth Scroll. A Chunin came and escorted them to Gate 13, where Naruto proceeded to activate the seals he had placed. Each of the applicants felt a tingle go down their spines, most likely due to fact that they were about to become Chunin and who wouldn't be. As Anko's voice blared over the intercom, Naruto took out one of his ramen-flavored Pocky and chewed on it for luck. "Well, in 30 seconds the gate will open and you will be let in. So I want to give you brats one last piece of advice. And you know what it is? It's simply, don't die, or I'll have to clean up the mess. Now go." The Chunin went through the fluid motion of opening up the chain, locking the gate and kicking open the door in half a second. Instantly, the genin team rushed in. Naruto creating a legion of clones, which dispersed in several directions, going after their intended targets. "Who are we going after, Naruto?" Haku asked after they had killed a giant tiger and a humongous scorpion right after that. "We're going after a group of Kuso ninja," he said as he slapped preservation seals on the bodies and sealed them away. They started to move, when a wind-up puppet bird landed at Naruto's feet. He took the note from its beak before channeling chakra into it, sending back to its owner. He read the note, and his eyebrows rose several inches as he did. "What is it?" "It's a note from Sasori of the Red Sand." Gaara and Haku stared at him in amazement. One of his spies has informed him that Orochimaru has infiltrated the exams and plans to invade the village with the help of Kumo during the final round. and that he will be coming to Konoha at the same time to see how much of a challenge I truly pose to him. He folded up the note and sealed it away before he began moving again. Orochimaru has the distinct characteristic of having an extremely long tongue. And so did the very Kuso ninja we are tracking. Looks like we got a fight on our hands. Scene change. Sasuke staggered back as the Kuso ninja laughed. You are strong, little Uchiha. But not strong enough. Her neck extended outwards, shooting towards Sasuke. The Kuso ninja had a gleeful gleam in his eye as he bit down into wood. He withdrew his neck to find a puppet standing in front of him. It was a side project puppet Naruto had finished the day before, called Black Fang. The thing was a defense puppet, with a thick frame filled with hundreds of reinforcement seals. It had 2 human eyes, with what looked like 8 massive blackened fangs sprouting from its back. It didn't have a face, just a massive mouth full of sharp teeth. It was dressed in a black cloak that covered a lot of its body. The Kuso ninja scowled at it as its owner descended to the branch Sasuke was standing on. He sealed the creation away before glaring at the ninja. Orochimaru of the Sannin, you will make a wonderful addition to my collection. Suddenly, all 10 fingers twitched. The 2 Uchiha puppets, Quicksilver, Genocide, Retribution, Desolation, Mizuki, Yin and Yang, and Zabuza rushed through the trees, ready to impale the Sannin, but the man jumped away. Naruto pulled all 10 of the puppets back to his side. Well, this is interesting. Orochimaru said, peeling off the face of the Kuso ninja. How did you know it was me? Sasori of the Red Sand warned me in advance. And the whole long tongue thing earlier was a big hint. Anbu and the Hokage should be here any second now. Orochimaru's eyes widened as he looked up in the clouds. A massive snake had been formed in the sky, with a leaf symbol with a slash symbol next to it. Haku snapped and the shape solidified. The benefits of being an ice user. Water is easy to manipulate. The snake Sannin glared at them before biting his thumb. Well then, I leave you with this present. Summoning jutsu. He disappeared as 4 mammoth snakes, 1 with 3 heads, 1 with 2 heads, and 2 with 1 head, shot through a massive cloud of smoke. Gaara, kill them, but preserve the bodies. Naruto ordered. Sand erupted from the ground, engulfing the snakes, flowing into their noses and mouths and any other opening on their bodies, flooding their bodies with sand and killing them. As Gaara withdrew the sand and he and Haku went through the process of sending a massive cloud of steam through it to purify the Jinchuriki's weapon, Naruto put a preservation seal, as well as a binding seal to keep the summons grounded to earth, onto the snakes, before sealing them away. He could turn humans and animals into puppets. What about summons? Naruto picked up the heaven scroll Orochimaru had so kindly left for them. Naruto looked around. He felt a strange feeling seeing Hanabi Hyuga lying on the ground, obvious under some kind of poisonous effect, and went over, flashing through a set of familiar hand signs to a poison-removing jutsu. A purplish-green fluid flowed out of her body and into a jar in Naruto's hand. He used a medical jutsu to heal her before he looked at his team, his eyes full of seriousness. The clones are waiting for us with the bodies outside of the tower. Let's get moving, shall we? Scene change. Orochimaru resurfaced from the tree melding jutsu. How had Sasori warned the brat? How had his former partner known about the invasion? But before he could contemplate it, he was surrounded by Anbu, Jiraiya, Anko, Kakashi, and the Sandaime. I let you escape all those years ago, Orochimaru. Don't expect for me to do it again. The ninja all rushed forward, but a blast of charka sent them reeling back. Orochimaru hissed, and by hissed, I mean hissed. He had turned into a massive white snake, made up of smaller white snakes, and as he curled around a tree, the Konoha ninja stared at him in repulsion. What's wrong, SS-sensei? He asked with mock confusion. Then he attacked. He swallowed 2 Anbu whole, but spit them out a moment later, not liking the taste. He rushed forward, but he was met with a problem, Anko. His former apprentice was standing atop a massive white and green snake he recognized as Oroyu, Manda's, the snake contract boss summons, younger brother. What a pity to see such a promising shinobi diminished to this. The snake said. Right before it lunged, he and Orochimaru tangled with each other, snapping, biting, hitting with their tails. Anko assailed him with kunai, but they did little. Finally, Orochimaru managed to break free and shot through the forests, shouting, "Another day Konoha filth. Another day. Damn it, he escaped again." Jiraiya yelled, slamming a Rasengan into the closest tree. The Sandaime smiled. "Don't worry, we'll be seeing him again soon enough. We just have to wait is all." "And why is that Lord Hokage?" a weasel-masked Anbu asked. "Because he wants your younger brother Itachi, and Naruto has become a major problem for him. He won't let leave without trying to deal with our local blonde-haired puppeteer," the Sandaime said, right before he shunshined away. Scene change. The Raikage was not enjoying the plan. He didn't want to attack Konoha, as Sarutobi was an old friend, but he didn't want an army of snakes destroying his village either. There had to be a middle, correct? If only he could find it. A was not a patient man, so having to wait for the snake Sannin was annoying. Very, very, very annoying, especially when he wanted to go get drunk. Finally the man arrived in his office. I couldn't hide the smile when he noticed the man was slightly weakened. He shoved it away and locked gazes with the other ninja. "Well, it seems we have been found out, eh? Are you sure your ninja can handle this?" A's chest puffed out. "Of course they can." Orochimaru nodded. "Okay. Now, about our plan. I need to be close to Sarutobi, as close as you will get," so, he lunged forward, but I was expecting this and dodged, before punching the man in the face, focusing every bit of lightning chakra he had into the punch. The Sannin hissed before jumping out the window. I ran over to it and began to shout. "Run, Snake Sannin. Kumo will not help you in this battle. Find a new ally," he yelled, loud enough for everyone in the village to hear. Lightning attacks flashed through the air as the Sannin fled through the village and was seen by several shinobi. Scene change. Naruto reached the tower and ordered the attendants to summon the Hokage, and that it involved Orochimaru. Hearing the name, they dashed off, and 5 minutes later, Sarutobi was there. "What is Naruto?" he asked. Naruto handed him Sasori's note and let the aged Hokage read over it. "Oh, this is grave news indeed." He looked at Naruto. "What do you intend to do about Sasori?" Naruto shrugged. "I would love for him to teach me, but if I can't do that, I'll simply destroy him and take all of his puppets. But I'll have to install my puppet armor first, and I need Tsunade, or a medic of her caliber, to do so, because I'm attaching it to my spinal synapse." Sarutobi's eyes widened. "How powerful is it?" "It will allow me to control as many puppets as I want, protect myself in a close quarters fight, poison my enemies, and operate one of my more powerful puppets we will need in the coming invasion." Sarutobi nodded. "I will summon her. And may I ask what this construct is?" Naruto pulled out the 3 sketch pads detailing it. Sarutobi's eyes widened again, and he began to laugh. "Now that is incredible." He handed the sketch pad back to Naruto. "We should be going. The preliminaries are beginning as we speak." Naruto nodded, and they disappeared further into the tower. Far away Orochimaru quivered in rage at the loss of Kumo as an ally. Farther away, Sasori finished tinkering with his puppets and began to move towards Konoha. Much further away, Tsunade was given a tip of a brand new massive casino opening up outside of Konoha. Closer, Jiraiya was standing in front of the memorial stone, staring at the names, Minato Namikaze, and Kushina Uzumaki, on the memorial stone, before turning away and walking back to the village. The hall was massive, with a large set of wooden hands forming a ram hand sign and a balcony lining the wall. The remaining teams all waited patiently. Naruto and his team had finished on the first day, but they had decided to go hunt down animals Naruto could use to make security puppets or armor. They had just returned back from one of said trips when they were told that it was time for the preliminaries to start. Only a few Team Shad made it through. Team Hokage, as Naruto, Gaara, and Haku were officially called, the team from Sound, Kuma and Suna, the Rookie 9, Team 9, a group of genin that had waited a year before taking the Chunin exams, and a group of 4-year failures, whose leader, a boy named Kabuto, quit soon after the prelims started. Alright, the proctor, a sickly-looking man named Hayate, said, "We have put your names into a system and they will be randomly shuffled on the board behind me." He told them as a section of the wall slid away to reveal a large screen. "Begin the shuffling process," he yelled, before going into a couching spasm. The names shuffled through, flashing at a speed that made them impossible to make out individually. Finally, the first two names slowed, revealing the first two fighters. Choji Akamichi vs. Jin Kyukitsuki. Choji begrudgingly walked down the steps to the center of the hall, where he met his opponent, the male member of the Kuma team. The boy was tall, almost 6 foot, dressed entirely in gray. He had on a gray cloak that was tattered around the edge, and he had his headband covering his face. "Fighters ready. Begin." Choji performed a jutsu that turned him in a massive ball and shot towards Jin. Jin reached up and tore off the headband, letting loose with a blood-curdling roar. Inside of his mouth was a nasty, dead-looking tongue, and 2 sharp-looking rows of venom-drenched teeth. His eyes were cold and gray, and his fingers were ragged claws. Wind chakra turned the ragged cloak into a set of wings that lifted the boy of the ground. Several of the ninjas screamed as he let loose with a poisonous cloud of yellow fog. "Yugito, what exactly is Jin?" Naruto asked the blonde who was only a few feet away from him. She smiled brightly at the question. "Well, a few years back, we found him outside of the village. He told us his name and wrote it down for us. When it's written in kanji, Kyukitsuki means vampire. And the reason for that is because of the missing nin, Orochimaru." Several sets of ears perked up at the name. He used Jin in one of his experiments to retain his youth, just because he had a fear of liver spots. Across the room, the Sound Junin, actually Orochimaru in disguise, had to use all of his self-control to stop himself from ripping Yugito apart. He turned Jin into a creature that had to feed off of his opponent's blood and chakra to grow powerful. He has several abilities granted to him by the experiment, but look at him. It was not worth it. Naruto stared down at the fight. Jin had his fist pulled back and let loose with a punch that sent Choji spiraling backwards into the way. The vampire ninja shot forward, and bit into Choji's arm. He began to suck on the blood from the wound, but Killer Bee appeared and pulled him back. He took a deep breath before spitting on the wound. The spit sizzled and the wound closed up, not even leaving a scar. "Winner of the first round, Jin Kyukitsuki," Hayate declared as the medics took Choji away. "Roll the names again." The shuffling sequence ran through again. Finally, it stopped, and a collective gasp filled the room. Naruto Uzumaki vs. Neji Hyuga. Both of the genin jumped down to the floor and stared at each other. "I will not hold back, Naruto. Even if I am living with you. I don't expect you to." Neji. Naruto snapped and the friction made a flame appeared on the end of each finger. "Besides, I wanted to try out this technique. Begin." Neji jumped into the air as Naruto punched the ground. A massive slab of rock flew into the air as the flames encased Naruto's entire arm. He punched the slab, sending it up towards Neji, while at the same time igniting it. Neji's eyes widened, but he quickly used a mid-air rotation to stop the attack. When he landed, Naruto was summoning one of the animal puppets from the forest. In a massive blast of smoke, a giant snake curled around Naruto. It was bigger than the entire room, circling the edge twice. Orochimaru's eyes widened. "How did that brat turn one of my summons into a puppet? Does that mean he has the others as puppets as well?" The snake lunged out at Neji, who simply ducked underneath it and jumped onto the ceiling. He flashed through hand signs as chakra began to form on his hands. The snake curled around and several of its scales opened up. Hundreds of kunai launched into the air as a massive disk of spinning chakra that oddly resembled a power saw blade formed above beneath Neji, blocking the attack. As the snake hissed, Neji fell, flipping over as he did. Destructo disc. The brunette yelled, letting loose with the disc of chakra that had shrunken down considerably. Naruto pulled the snake back as quickly as possible, barely dodging the attack, which obliterated the floor where it landed. Naruto pulled the snake back, sealing it up as he did. He unrolled a second scroll and looked for a particular kanji that meant stinger. A massive scorpion, the largest one they had found, in the center of a massive colony of them, appeared. It had been near impossible to kill, until Gaara had wrapped it up in sand, Haku had frozen it, and Naruto had stabbed it with its own tail. But the thing still struggled. Even as Naruto sliced it open and began to remove the organs, it kept fighting, until he had ripped out the monster's heart, lungs, and brain. He had hollowed it out, added several reinforcement seals, and put in several powerful weapons. Part of the back opened up, and Naruto jumped in. Instantly, the tail rushed through the air and almost impaled Neji. The Hyuga dodged strikes just like this, nearly getting grazed several times, backing up as he went. The scorpion had to move forward to attack him, and as Neji hit wall, he smirked. The tail came back to lunge, and the Destructo disc shot up, removing the tail. Naruto exited the puppet and sealed it away, intending to repair it later. Time to end this, Neji. Naruto said. Before Neji could reply, the blonde started to form something around itself. It was a massive silhouette, animal-like, crouching behind Naruto, with 2 slitted eyes, and 9 waving tails. The Chakra Kyuubi jumped forward, slamming Neji against the wall, knocking him out in the process. Winner, Naruto Uzumaki. Hayate yelled, the first to snap out of the stupor. It was amazing what Naruto could do with those puppets of his. As he began to move towards the stairs, it happened. The Sound Junin jumped over the railing, tearing off his face as he did, revealing Orochimaru. The snake Sannin extended his neck outwards, straight towards Naruto, who was too shocked to react. He bit into Naruto's neck, and the blonde yelled in pain. The snake Sannin began to retreat as a mark formed. It was a miniature version of the complex Shiki Fuin seal keeping the Kyuubi sealed. The snake Sannin took advantage of the shock in the room to exit building, Naruto trailing after him. He unsealed his 3 most powerful puppets, the 3 Ginta puppets. Haku, who was dressed in all red, red shirt, red pants, red jacket, with his red hair cut short, was surrounded by flames that danced and conformed to Naruto's will. Yuku was dressed entirely in blue, with his blue hair spike up, as 3 pillars of water danced around him. Zansatsu, the final Ginta, was dressed in a pair of white pants, a gray shirt, and a long cloak with a massive tornado swirling around it. He rode a massive tornado like it was nothing. Naruto and the 3 puppets rushed after the Sannin, followed by the Hokage and several Anbu, as Hayate tried to continue the contest. Scene change. Naruto rushed after Orochimaru, funneling the Kyuubi's chakra into the seal, trying as hard as he could to neutralize it. That was when the message came in. Boy, that snake bastard put part of his soul in that seal. I'm fighting it, but I will need help to destroy it. Die, you son of a bitch. Wait, keep that thing away from little Kyuubi. Ah. Naruto sped up after the snake ninja, who was beginning to slow. He turned, smiling evilly, only to see Naruto with the 3 Ginta puppets rushing through the air towards him. Haku sent a massive pillar of fire towards Orochimaru, while Yuku sent out 3 dragons of water to intercept him. Zansatsu jumped through the air and summoned a cyclone that reached over the tree tops. The 3 attacks raced towards the Sannin, each trying to destroy the man. Orochimaru flashed through hand signs and jumped down, sinking into the earth and out of the forests as the 3 attacks collided and exploded. Naruto fell to his knees, breathing heavily as he sealed up the 3 puppets. He arched his back and fell on his hands as the seal began pulse and slitted eye pattern flowed out from it, covering his upper body. He howled in pain as he was drawn into his mindscape. Scene change. Naruto charged down the sewer hallways towards the massive red light. When he arrived in the center chamber, he saw Orochimaru jumping around, dodging blasts from the Kyuubi as the demon fired chakra from the tips of its tails. Naruto brought his hand up and began to concentrate. Being inside his mindscape, he should be able to control the surrounding. There was a massive explosion of smoke as the Kyuubi was released from its cage, a collar around his throat. All of Naruto's puppets, as well as the finished version of the construct beneath the apartment, appeared, and rushed towards the snake, reforming if they were destroyed. And finally, Naruto let out a mighty roar as he turned himself into a massive golden Kyuubi. The piece of Orochimaru's soul never stood a chance. It lasted for hours, as the soul was able to dodge most of their strikes, but eventually, Naruto speared him through the chest with one of his tails and slammed the body into the ground until it disintegrated. Scene change. Naruto gasped as he resurfaced from his mindscape. Jiraiya was next to him, watching as the seal shrunk back into Naruto's neck. What happened, kid? Orochimaru put a piece of his soul inside of the seal, and the Kyuubi and I managed to hold it off, even remove it for a short amount of time, so for a while I should have control over the seal, but if I'm not careful, the snake could take control again. Mind putting a suppression seal on it for me? Jiraiya smirked and knocked Naruto out. The blonde slumped to the side as the Sannin shunshined away with him to a chamber large enough for the procedure. He made several shadow clones and had them paint a seal array as he began to paint the necessary seals on Naruto's body. 30 minutes later, Jiraiya crossed his hands into a seal, and yelled, "Seal." A massive pulse of light expelled from Naruto as the ink around them shot across the floor and up Naruto's body, to the seal on his neck. Will it hold, Jiraiya? Sarutobi asked as he stepped out of the shadows. I believe so, sensei. It will block the seal only as long as the boy chooses not to rely on it, and he doesn't seem like the kind to rely on others to give him strength when he could gain it himself. Sarutobi nodded before looking at the boy he cared about, his adopted grandson. He groaned and sat up, much to the shock of the 2 adults. Hey, where am I? He asked as pulled his clothes over to him with chakra strings. You are 2 floors below the preliminaries. If you hurry you can make it in time to pick a number and find out who you are facing. Sarutobi explained. Naruto nodded before exploding into flames and disappearing. I knew he had high reserves, but to be able to wake up moments after having an A- level seal put on him is a testament to him and the seal Minato designed. The old cage said. The 2 men stared off into space, remembering the boy who had given up his life, wishing that his son would be considered a hero. Too bad no one honored that wish, or things would have ended differently. Scene change. Naruto landed at the end of the line of genin, much to the shock of the other contestants. The blonde stared down the line, counting, and figuring out who was a problem. Counting him, 12 people had made it. Gaara, Haku, Sakura, Sasuke, Shikamaru, Gaara's siblings, Yugito Ni, a boy named Rock Lee, Hanabi, and finally, Jin. Each of them would draw a number from a hat to decide who would face who. As they took their number, they called it out for all to hear. 8. Gaara said. 3. Said Shikamaru. 7. Said Sakura. 1. Yugito called. 11. Hanabi said. 4. Said Tamari, Gaara's sister. 12. Said Kankuro, Gaara's brother. 2. Naruto informed them. 5. Haku said. 9. Sasuke said. 6. Jin hissed. 10. My youthful companions. Lee yelled, pumping his fists in the air. Ibiki, the first proctor, appeared and wrote down the numbers as each was called, before writing them name down on a board. Yugito Ni vs Naruto Uzumaki. Shikamaru Nara vs Tamari. Haku vs Jin Kyukatsuki. Sakura Haruno vs Gaara. Sasuke vs Rock Lee. Hanabi Hyuga vs Kankuro. The Hokage appeared and cleared his throats. My young friends, allow me to tell you the true purpose of the Chunin exams. Long ago, the ninja villages were in a constant war, so they came up with a test that showed who had the strongest genin, and thus the strongest future ninja. This kept war from breaking out and at the same time, flooded the village with the most winners with missions. Very important people, such as cages, village leaders, and daimyo, come to see the exams. And to give them time to get here, we are giving each of you a 1-month training period. Take this time to get strong and study your opponent. You are dismissed. Scene change. Naruto nodded, retracting the chakra strings from the piece of the construct, and let his clones move it back into position. He moved over to where Lady Chio was standing, pulling clones out of dangerous situations and calling out instructions. Lady Chio, it's time I tell you a secret I have kept from you for the past 3 days. I have been back from the second part of the exams. While I was going through the test, I received a letter from Sasori of the Red Sand, warning me of an invasion by Orochimaru and Kuma, and recently, I got a second letter, saying Kuma had pulled out and now Orochimaru was allying them with Mist. Chio's eyes widened with each word as Naruto reached into his hip pouch and put the notes on the desk. I am sorry, was all he said before he disappeared. Scene change. Naruto pushed the final mechanism into a puppet series. He smiled as a pulse of sound filled the room. He lifted each puppet up, before beginning to work on them. They were the Sound Spectrum series, and each used an instrument to cause damage physically, or by casting a genjutsu. There was a violin, a guitar, a flute, a clarinet, a drum, a trumpet, a harp, a piano, a trombone, and a saxophone. After a few hours he got them to work together, and moved to the roof. Orchestra style. Ghosts of Love. He whispered while forming hand seals and moving the puppets together, causing them to begin playing together. The bustling sounds of Konoha ceased as the haunting melody flowed through the air, filling the head of each person with thoughts of loved ones long gone, even from when they were a baby and didn't remember. Laughter, tears, fights, conversations, precious moments, betrayals, the jutsu brought them all to the top of the person's mind. The song floated out through the village for a full 10 minutes before Naruto finally ended it. He had done it for a reason. Locked behind his eyes, set permanently into his head, was the image of his mother, the famed Kushina Uzumaki, rocking him and a girl in her arms, with his father, the fourth Hokage, leaning over next to them with another girl in his arms. Scene change. The Hokage stared at the genin before him with admiration. Each of them dropped the jutsu they were working on as the Hokage nodded to them. Well, the 3 of you are doing very well, so I have decided that each of you should get a special reward. The old man pulled out 3 scrolls and threw them to Haku. After several long hours of searching through the memories of ninja who had fought your kinsman, I have compiled a list of jutsu your clan has. Jiraiya of the Sannin appeared, grinning, with several pots of ink and brushes. For Gaara, I will have Jiraiya here fix your seal so the Shukaku has no hold over you any longer. If you will just go with him. The redhead nodded before following Jiraiya out of the clearing. And for Naruto, I have something special. He said, pulling out 5 manila envelopes stacked on top of each other. He handed them to Naruto, who opened them up and stared at the information within. I thought it was time you had this. The blonde nodded solemnly as the Hokage shunshined away. What's in the envelopes? Haku asked, putting away the scrolls. He wanted to pore over them, to learn every jutsu within, but he couldn't, because Naruto had a contemplating, confused face on his face. Naruto was never confused. It's information on me, my parents, and my 2 sisters. He said, walking off into the forest. He jumped into a tree, and pulled out the papers within the first folder, labeled, Kushina Uzumaki, and began to read to himself. Name: Kushina Uzumaki Namikaze, Konoha's Bloody Whirlpool. Status: retired, in hiding. Facts. Last surviving member of the famed clan from Whirlpool Country, which is currently a piece of Earth Country. Wife of the late Minato Namikaze. Mother of Tayuya missing, Karen missing, and Naruto deceased. Hokage's note. Still alive. File writer fired after this file was finished. Uzumaki Namikaze. Under the protection of Jiraiya of the Sannin. Famed for her Hydra summoning contract, as well as the whirlpool of blood sword style. She opted to leave Naruto in the village so she could raise Karen and Tayuya correctly. Below is a list of her abilities and her current hiding place. Naruto shifted to the next page, studying the map of how to get to her, memorizing the traps, the security routes, the blueprints of the house. He put the folders away for later, and pulled out the next set of files. Name: Tayuya Uzumaki Namikaze. Status: missing, kidnapped, Orochimaru suspected. Facts: little is known about this child, except that she seemed to have a love of the music produced by flutes, and an aptitude for genjutsu. She had the green eyes of her mother, as well as the red hair. At the age of 3, she was kidnapped between movements of safe houses, presumably by Orochimaru of the Sannin, a rank missing nin of Konoha. A report detailing the capture of the child as well as her sister Karen follows this. See picture of child below. Naruto slid the files away once again, and pulled the file on Karen. Name: Karen Uzumaki Namikaze. Status: missing, kidnapped, Orochimaru suspected. Facts: little is known about this child, except that she was said to have the Kekkei Genkei of the Namikaze clan, which allows whoever bit her to suck on her chakra and heal them, and she was a suspected chakra sensor. She had the red hair of her mother, as well as red eyes of her grandfather on her father's side. At the age of 3, she was kidnapped between movements of safe houses, presumably by Orochimaru of the Sannin, a rank missing nin of Konoha. A report detailing the capture of the child as well as her sister Tayuya follows this. See picture of child below. Naruto opened the next envelope, the one containing the information on his father, Minato Namikaze. Name: Minato Namikaze, Konoha's Yellow Flash. Status: deceased, sacrificed himself to seal away Kyuubi. Facts: the fourth Hokage, also known as Konoha's Yellow Flash, Minato Namikaze, sacrificed his life to seal the Kyuubi no Kitsune into his firstborn son, Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, but the sealing failed, and the Kyuubi took over Naruto's body. Edit: the Kyuubi didn't take over Naruto's body, but was sealed inside the boy. File writer executed. He grew famous in the Third Shinobi War when he created a technique that allowed him to teleport to a seal, which he placed on a kunai and gave to ninja to throw into battle, where he would appear and cause massive damage. He created a technique called the Rasengan, which is a spinning sphere of chakra, which can cause damage on a molecular level. The technique took him 2.5 years to complete, and requires 3 steps to be mastered first. High A ranked jutsu. Minato was the first shinobi to ever get a flee on-site order in the Bingo book. More detailed report on following files. Naruto put the file away and sealed it away with the first 3 to look over later. He opened the final folder. Inside were 2 versions of the opening report. Name: Naruto Uzumaki, Uzumaki Namikaze. Status: deceased, possessed. Facts: Naruto's father, who he looked like, sacrificed his life to seal the 9-tailed fox, the Kyuubi no Kitsune, into him, but his seal was flawed. The Kyuubi possessed him and now he terrorizes the village, biding his time until he can become a ninja and learn to remove the seal and destroy the village. Footnote: report invalid, writer executed. Name: Naruto Uzumaki, Uzumaki Namikaze. Status: ninja, genin. Facts: Naruto is feared around the village for his ability to turn humans into puppets and have them protect his compound. He is powerful, and is expected to either become the leader of the village one day, or destroy it completely. He is the personal ninja of the Hokage, and has several powerful human and non-human puppets. His 2 sisters, Yuya and Karen, were abducted by Orochimaru. His mother is Kushina Uzumaki Namikaze, Konoha's Bloody Whirlpool, and his father is Minato Namikaze, Konoha's Yellow Flash. The report went on to detail his puppets, his abilities, his grades, and several other facts that were far too sensitive for Naruto to let exist, so he ripped them up, burned them, sealed the ashes away, sealed away those ashes, dropped that scroll into a lake, before using a jutsu to boil the lake away. He walked away as, not realizing a root Anbu was cursing under his breath at the loss of such information. Scene change. Yugito swung her leg around and jumped back as the tree toppled to the ground. She panted for a second, before she straightened up and flipped backwards, dodging an electrified pencil. She landed on the ground and sent out a massive wave of black fire around them, while at the same time summoning up a legion of samurai soldiers. She used an earth-style jutsu to dive into the ground and move through the soil to find her teammate for this exercise, Jin. Her other teammate, Yuri, the team's genjutsu effort, would be working with Killer Bee. She surfaced besides Jin, who was finishing up a set of seals. From his mouth flowed a river of darkness that blotted out the sunlight. Over the rush of the dark, she heard him mumble, "Forbidden Juts. Antimatter Jutsu." The antimatter flowed through the forest, cutting off the light, forming a dome of darkness. Jin pulled off covering off his face, and his eyes glowed slightly, letting him see through the darkness. The edge of Yugito's eyes glowed with black flames, giving her the same ability. As the two ninja crept through the darkness, a bolt of lightning exploded, temporarily illuminating the dome through the antimatter. Yugito morphed into the flaming cat as her sensei flew at her in his two-tailed form. Scene change. Sasuke's eyes widened at what his father was saying. He wanted them to rise up against the village and kill the Hokage after an invasion by the S-rank missing Nin Orochimaru. Instead of reporting the invasion to the Hokage, or even the council, they are going to use it to better themselves. Sasuke was repulsed by the idea, but nodded his head enthusiastically as his father explained it to him. As soon as the meeting was over, Sasuke bolted out of the compound, heading towards the Hokage tower. He ran past the secretary and kicked the door down. The Hokage had opened his mouth to beginning speaking to Naruto, Gaara, and Haku, who had just arrived, when Sasuke ran in. "Lord Hokage, I have terrible news. I'm sorry Sasuke, this is rather important. Could you please just wait outside? The village is going to be invaded in the Chunin exam finale. And after that, my clan is going to try a coup to take control of the village." Naruto, Haku, and Gaara all stared at him in shock, while the Hokage simply shook his head. "I was just about to tell Team Hokage here the same thing. Your older brother warned us during the second exam." Sasuke's eyes widened and he fell back into a chair. "Now, as I was saying before Sasuke came in," the Hokage said, unrolling a map in front of them. "We knew about this for a while now. And we've come up with a plan. Naruto, we will need your help though. Marked on this map are hundreds of different bandit camps, each of which holds at least 100 bandits. The village needs you, I need you, to go and kill each of these bandits, and turn them into human puppets. Then we want you to set up arrays like in your compound around the village to control these puppets. No doubt Orochimaru will try to attack me during the exams, so I need you to get to me as soon as possible and help drive him off. Once we've done that, we'll have to deal with the bigger threat, the summoning he intends to use to get through the wall, and of course the Jinchuriki of Kiri and the Mizukage, Yugura. He holds within him the three-tailed turtle shark. You can handle him with your main construct if it comes out as planned. Haku, your role in this is at the front lines, where you will help neutralize the attacks of the Mist Ninja. Gaara, we need you in your final form, fighting off Yugura until Orochimaru is neutralized for good. Do you understand?" "Yes, Lord Hokage," they yelled, before disappearing. Sarutobi turned and smiled. "Now, as for your part in all of this Sasuke." Scene change. Naruto stared at the construct before him. He was so close to being finished, he could taste it. But he wanted it done soon, so he could test out the different functions and master them. So he took a deep breath and began to draw on the chakra of the Kyuubi. The fox begrudgingly let it go, since Naruto had given him freedom from the cage, as well as made the mindscape a massive place for him to roam as he wanted. Once he had 3 tails, Naruto made a hand seal and poured all of the fox's chakra into the shadow clone jutsu. He fell to the ground, panting, and feeling tired. He stared at his hands in confusion. So this is chakra exhaustion, huh? He pulled out a stick of Pocky and began to chew as the 10,000 clones, all feral from the red chakra, shot through the air and began to work, moving the construction along quicker. Scene change. Kankuro finished training with his puppets, and sealed 2 of them away, while keeping out Crow. Tamari folded up her fan and strapped it to her back. Together they walked away from the carnage they had caused. Senbon littered the ground, gouges were ripped in the earth, trees were toppled, and several black spots dotted the ground. Kankuro pulled away from Tamari though, as they got to the center of village. While Tamari went to the hotel room, Kankuro went to the slums. He stared at the massive buildings, linked together by tunnels, with a large wall with several ballista and puppets dancing over the top. Several cameras swung back and forth, watched by one of the former slaves Naruto had freed. The only way in was to climb the wall, go through the door, or dig underneath. Kankuro couldn't go through the door. Naruto would never let him in once he realized that Kankuro wanted to spy on his puppets. He couldn't dig under, since none of his puppets were designed for digging through dirt, so he would have to climb over the wall. In a blast of smoke, Salamander appeared, and Kabuto climbed inside. Instantly, the puppet started to climb up the wall and onto the top. It slammed down, causing a security puppet to be destroyed, activating the seals which caused all other puppets to rush to the destroyed puppet's location. The salamander rushed down the wall and across the grounds, deploying its shield to deflect the attacks of puppets and the ballista. Kankuro was almost at the entrance, when a massive pillar of sand shot up beneath him. A wave of water swallowed his puppet, and froze, trapping him within. Then the orb of ice was punched or kicked, Kankuro couldn't tell, and slammed into the wall. If it hadn't been for the shield, the puppet user would be dead. The latch above him opened up and he was fiercely pulled out. A snake puppet slithered out of his capturer's, Naruto, sleeve and swirled up to him, hissing. Venom dripped from the teeth as the snake lunged, stopping an inch from the sand genin. Instead, the snake redirected its course and bit into a tree close to Kankuro. The tree instantly wilted, before catching on fire and blowing away in the wind. The blonde pulled him closer and glared at him. Listen to me, amateur. Using a puppet created by someone else makes you weak. Only by creating your own puppet can you truly become a great puppeteer. And with that, the blonde swung the chakra strings around in a circle above his head, sending the makeup-wearing boy over the wall and onto the edge of the slums. Scene change. Naruto, Hanabi, Neji, and Hinata spared together, slamming chakra pulses into each other. Naruto and Hanabi were at an advantage, mainly because they could use the chakra ray pulse variation, but Neji could use the 8 trigrams 128 palms and Hinata had a technique she called protection of the 8 trigrams she was working on. Together, the 4 of them were causing the towers to rock back and forth just from the blasts of stray chakra. Naruto pulled his fist back and punched the floor. Hundreds of spikes of chakra shot into the air, forcing the Hyuga to attach to the ceiling. Naruto pulled all of his chakra into the center of his body, nearly blinding the Hyuga. It's time I show you the ultimate technique of the chakra ray pulse, he said as he expelled the chakra and began to shift it into a new form. Instantly, a massive demon appeared around him. It had samurai armor, with a skeletal left arm, which held its sword. The mouth was filled with 14 sharp, triangle-shaped teeth. Attached to its back were 2 skeletal wings. Naruto floated in the center of the giant samurai, his eyes glowing with chakra. He swung his left arm, and the samurai swung his sword arm, and stabbed the ground, causing snakes of chakra to dive in and out of the floor, flying towards the three Hyuga. The cousins grabbed onto each other's wrists, with Neji in the center of them, and Hanabi and Hinata on the edge. As the girls jumped in the air, Neji began to spin, and as all three expelled their chakra, they yelled, 8 trigrams, tri-Hyuga rotation. The snakes collided with a massive rotation and dispersed. Naruto flapped the skeletal wings, and several crescents of chakra slammed into the dome, sending the three Hyuga flying backwards. Naruto dropped to the ground, drawing the chakra back into himself. He walked over and smiled superiorly at the three other ninja. That's why this is my compound. Scene change. Naruto walked into the Hokage Tower one morning, when there was only 18 days left to train. He had gotten a note from a shadow clone of the Hokage, telling him to come to the tower at a particular time. And here he was, marching up the stairs towards the office. As reached the top floor, the secretary glared at him. Go away, demon brat. The Hokage will not see you today. He has people who actually matter in there. She probably would have kept on ranting if Naruto hadn't planted a kunai in between her eyes. The corpse slumped back as Naruto opened the door, to find the Hokage talking to a blonde woman, with large breasts and pigtails, and a second woman with short black hair holding a pig. And speaking of Naruto, Sarutobi said, standing up. This is your next patient. The blonde looked him over carefully, with what was known as the medic's eye, circling him, checking muscle mass, running a hand through his hair, and several other annoying things. What's wrong with him? She asked. Naruto's mind finally put the facts together, and he realized he was talking to Tsunade of the Sannin. Nothing is wrong with me, as much as the village. Naruto said, interrupting the Sandame. Orochimaru tends to attack and destroy it with the help of Kiri during the Chunin exam finales. And I need you to install this so I can stop him. He pulled out the notebook containing the details on the operation and handed it to her. She scanned each page intently, flipping through them slowly, memorizing every word and picture on the pages. She nodded and handed the pad back to Naruto. Fuck you, brat, she said, before turning to leave the office. What a pathetic excuse for a ninja. Naruto said. Tsunade froze in place. I know about Dan and Nawaki. They died protecting the village, fighting for you and everyone else they loved. I just know they would be ashamed to hear you openly scorning the village they gave their lives for. Tsunade turned around, letting out a terrifying roar, and threw one of her legendary punches. Naruto raised a finger and caught the punch. The shockwave, however, ripped up the floorboards. Naruto grabbed her wrist and spun around, pinning the arm behind her back. He pushed her to the ground and painted a seal on her palm. As soon as he touched it, her chakra began to flow into him, and her true form was revealed, a wrinkly old woman. The transformation spread up to her arm, before he apprentice shot forward, knocking him off and erasing the seal. Naruto flipped across the office and in a blast of smoke unsealed the massive scorpion and snake as well as a giant tiger he had gotten from the forest of death. The puppets pushed up against the ceiling, causing the wood to begin to crack. Naruto flashed through hand signs and stomped. The wall behind him exploded and he pulled the puppets out with him, yelling as he went, "Come on, you miserable excuse for a wrinkled-up version of a shinobi." Tsunade popped a soldier pill in her mouth and launched out after him. They dashed across town, each of them throwing an attack in at every chance. Naruto led her across the rooftops to the slums, where he jumped on top of a wall. He sealed away the puppets quickly and jumped up into the puppet tower. Tsunade followed him, her blind rage, stopping her from where she was going. Naruto landed on the elevator and activated it as Tsunade dove in. He dodged her attacks until the door opened up. He rolled backwards and she followed him, into the room full of thousands of shadow clones and the main construct. She gazed up at the creation before her, her eyes wide in amazement. This is what I need the surgery for. I'll use the component to control this thing. I theorize I should have just enough time to recover and have a week to train with the construct. If we sew it tomorrow. You're going to train with that, in Konoha? She asked, pointing at the hundreds of lifts, seals, compartments, clones, weapons, and internal gears. No, I intend to go to Suna to train. The cage has already given me permission to do so. But I need that component, or else this will have all been for nothing. Tsunade couldn't help but let the memories of her lover and little brother flood her mind. They would have wanted her to do it. Okay kid, I'll do it. I just need to get the materials and prepare. I have the material, you just need to prep the room. While you are doing that, I'm going to find that white-haired, super pervert, and get him to set up the last few seals. And of course I need to go get some new puppets I've been waiting weeks to get my hands on. Scene change. Operating room, Konoha Hospital, next day. Naruto breathed in the gas, and felt himself slipping away. Tsunade waited until he was completely out, and the anesthesia had taken effect, before she formed a chakra scalpel and slit the skin covering his spinal column open. She picked up the component carefully. The top was a circular metal piece, with hollow tubes that led into the other piece Naruto's clones and Jiraiya were finishing. The bottom had needles that connected to the spinal column and allowed the device to run on Naruto's bioelectricity. Tubes extended from the seal, each with several seals painted into it by a very small puppet. On the end of each was a needle as well. She carefully took the hoses and pushed the needles into the chakra circulatory system. The seals within the tubes glowed brightly before dying down, and she moved on to attaching the device to Naruto's spinal membrane. But it was easy enough. She positioned it over the small of his back and the needles extended into the bone. She attached the other tubes to his spine and chakra circulatory system. She had to do each step incredibly slowly, so as not to make even the tiniest mistake. 4 hours later, she backed away and watched in awe as the red chakra flowed over the skin and healed in seamlessly. The only reminder that something was there were the 5 hollow tubes extending out of the skin. Jiraiya came in a moment later holding the second piece. It was circular, with several storage seals on the edge, with who knows what inside. The center seal held a simple storage seal that contained a scroll with several advanced seals that Naruto, Jiraiya, the Hokage, and Kakashi had spent several hours placing. The piece of armor fit perfectly into place and the two teammates smiled at each other. An hour later, Naruto awoke. He went outside, much to Tsunade's chagrin and anger, and summoned every puppet in the compound, as well as unsealing all his normal puppets. The piece of miniature armor glowed and thousands of chakra strings shot out. Each of the puppets moved into a combat-ready stance, before Naruto smiled and sent them back from where they came from. He turned to Jiraiya with a serious look on his face. Alright, time for the final step of this process. The use of the ultimate poison that no medic can heal. Oh, Tsunade asked, prepared to take on a challenge. And what might that be? Naruto smiled to himself. The Yuki of the Kyuubi no Kitsune. Scene change. The month was finally up and hundreds of dignitaries from different lands as well as the Land of Fire had come to see the finale. Since the exams were an open event, if a Kage wanted to go watch them, he was more than welcome to. But when the Mizukage and the Tsuchikage appeared unexpectedly, marking the first time in years since the 5 Kages had come together outside of a war council or summit. Well Sarutobi, it seems everyone is here except for your Jinchuriki. The Mizukage, a Jinchuriki himself, said matter-of-factly. Yes Yagura, I noticed. But you will soon come to find out that young Naruto has a flair for the dramatics. Ah, here he comes now. Off in the distance, a star twinkled. Suddenly, a giant bird came streaking through the sky, propelled by what was obviously a huge amount of wind chakra. The bird was 20 feet wide and bigger than a Hummer. And riding on the back of it was none other than Naruto. The bird dive-bombed the massive dome where the exams were going to be held. As it reached the floor, it leveled out, just barely not crashing, and something slid off the back. As the monster flew higher in the air, the crowd stared in awe at Naruto, who was maneuvering the giant bird with chakra strings extending from his backs. The bird flew upwards, before doing a flip and rushing Naruto again. An inch from the blonde's face, it exploded into a cloud of smoke that obscured the field. When the smoke cleared, Naruto was spinning a kunai on his fingers. He was dressed in a pair of baggy white pants, an orange shirt, and a dark orange cloak with black flames dancing around the bottom. Strapped diagonally across his back were two katana, and his scrolls containing his puppets were hanging from his waist. The crowd stared at Naruto in shock, before exploding into cheers at the entrance. Naruto smiled slightly to himself as the proctor rolled his eyes. All right everybody, wave to the crowd, make them cheer, keep them occupied until Lord Hokage starts the exams. Haku leaned in closer to Naruto. Was that your main construct? Naruto smiled. Nowhere near it. Cage box. Well Yagura, I will make you a deal. I bet you my monkey summoning contract that Naruto will come out on top today, and by the time he is finished, even you will fear him. Sarutobi said calmly, sitting back down. He and Yagura had been standing a few inches away from each other, electricity arching between them. Now Sarutobi was seated, his arms crossed over his chest, and Yagura was staring at him in shock. The Jinchuriki Kage smiled, showing his fang-like teeth. And if I lose, simply put, you will step down from your position and train my personal ninja in water-style technique. The other cages stared at Yagura waiting for his answer. The Mizukage stuck his hand out, and he and Sarutobi shook. I always did enjoy the taste of monkey, but they are so rare in Kiri. Yagura said, sitting back down. Onoki, Taigai means air scythe just randomly made it up, Sarutobi said, addressing the Raikage, the Tsuchikage, and the Kazekage by their first names. Would you like in on this? The Kazekage, Taigai, nodded and pulled out a scroll. I bet this scroll, which contains a very powerful wind-style jutsu I created myself, that Naruto will be the hero of the day. The Raikage pulled out a scroll. This contains a set of swords made from a special chakra-conducting metal, 3 of them to be precise. I'm betting that Team Hokage as well as my own 2 genin make chunin. Onoki rubbed his mustache. I bet this, he said, pulling a deed. It's the deed to the country once known as Whirlpool. I bet that the blonde ninja will be revealed to be a flashy weakling. Sarutobi smiled to himself. Looks like Naruto would be getting his own country. He already made it very clear he didn't want to stay in Konoha. This way he could keep a link to Konoha and Sarutobi. The 5 cages shook hands before the Hokage stood up and went to the edge of the cage box. People of Konoha, feudal lords, daimyo, ninja, it's time. The contestants have had a month to train themselves up for this day. So, let the 73rd annual Chunin Xmas begin. The crowd exploded into cheers as the Hokage sat back in his chair. Near him, under the disguise of one of the Mizukage's guards, Orochimaru glared at the old man. Oh how he would enjoy watching the life leave that body as he drove his sword into the man's heart. The proctor nodded and turned to Yugito and Naruto. You two stay down here. The rest of you, go up to the stands. Once the other contestants had reached the viewing box, the proctor turned to the crowd. Naruto mentally smacked himself for not noticing it earlier. This was a new proctor. His name was Genma, and he was known for chewing a senbon. Something must have happened to Hayate during the month. Alright, listen up, since both of you are Jinchuriki, we ask that you not release your demon. If you can control its power, you may use it, but any releasing of the beast and you shall be disqualified and removed from the village. Naruto and Yugito nodded and Genma jumped backwards onto the railing of the viewing box, which the 2 genin took as a signal to begin. Naruto rushed forwards and tried to deliver a gentle fist strike, but Yugito spun over it and swung a kick out. Naruto ducked and swung his leg, taking Yugito's legs from out underneath her. She landed on her hands and did a reverse roll, dodging a katana stab. Flowing around the two blades were red chakra. Yugito's eyes widened as Naruto began to laugh evilly. Taste the power of the king of demons, the most powerful of the Biju, fluffers. Everyone in the crowd deadpanned as a fox head formed between the two swords. I told you not to call me that, you little brat. What's wrong with your name, Fluffers? Don't you like it? If our life forces weren't linked, I'd rip you to shreds, you blonde moron. Would you prefer Fluffy? How about Precious? Or maybe Princess? Yeah, your new name is Princess. I'd rather be Fluffers. Sarutobi was laughing harder than he'd ever laughed before in the cage box. Well, I knew Naruto is a lot of things, he said between laughs, but a comedian is a new one to me. As the demon and the blonde continued to argue, the crowd began to smile and laugh as well. Here was the boy they had hurt and cursed, pissing off the demon they feared and caused those things to happen to him. It was a sobering thought, really. As they laughed, they realized how bad they had hurt Naruto for something completely out of his control, and they had made an assumption that was completely wrong about him. Finally, Naruto pulled the two swords apart, dissipating the fox head with a yell of, "Talk to you later, Fluffers," and swung the blades. Two crescents of red energy slashed through the ground, heading for Yugito, who punched the ground, causing a massive wall of skeletal bones to rise upwards into the air. That is an interesting ability. The Nibi give it to you. As the wall lowered, Yugito smiled. Yep, the Nibi has control over the dead. Naruto grimaced. This meant he couldn't use his once living puppets on her. Oh well, he had the newest ones he could use. And they would cause plenty of damage. Naruto sheathed the swords, their purpose of finding out Yugito's defenses fulfilled, and began to flash through hand signs. He took a deep breath before yelling, "Wind style, Dragon's Wings Jutsu." A massive torrent of wind expelled itself from Naruto's mouth, forming in a dragon around him. It roared and flew straight at Yugito. She brought the wall of bone back up with a smirk, and began a chain of seals herself. Crack! Yugito froze as the sound echoed around the stadium. Suddenly, the wall of bone exploded and she began to draw on the chakra of the Nibi to save herself. She gasped as the dragon slammed her into the wall. The amount of chakra behind the jutsu was massive, but Naruto looked no worse for wear. Of course, when you have the Kyuubi as a prisoner within you, this is to be expected. Yugito tugged herself out of the wall and began raining down kunai. Naruto sidestepped each kunai, or deflected it. When Yugito had only one kunai left, she jumped into the air and threw it with as much strength as she could pull from the Nibi behind it. Naruto barely had time to pull up his own kunai, but Yugito's sailed through it and embedded itself in his arm. He tried pulling it out but it wouldn't budge. Don't even try, the other blonde said. It's embedded and fused with your bone. One kunai doesn't win a battle. Naruto stated as he reached for the katana. It doesn't have to. Look at the way the kunai landed around you. Naruto looked around, and his eyes grew twice their size. It's an jutsu amplifier seal. Yep, Yugito said, just as she finished the hand seals for one of her most powerful jutsu. She grabbed her right wrist with her left hand as an orb of lightning began to take form inside of it. The tiny sphere electrified the air, making the girl's hair stand on end. The orb finished forming, and she brought it above her head. Lightning style. Infinite storm jutsu. The orb of lightning fired into the air and exploded. Instantly, thunderclouds began to form. Naruto started to jump out of the seal array, when a bolt of lightning came down from the sky and split, hitting every kunai in the array. As the electricity was amplified, it raced around the array faster, until it reached its destination, Naruto. The blonde boy screamed in pain as the electricity raced through his body. He pulled out every bit of Kyuubi's chakra he could, trying to lessen the pain, but it did very little. Finally, Yugito ended the jutsu, and Naruto was revealed. The kunai still had electricity dancing over it, the top part of his hair was smoking, and his skin was burned badly. Naruto pulled on 3 tails, letting the chakra form around him, healing him and protecting him. He picked up the katana he had dropped and pointed it at Yugito. Don't ever do that again. The older blonde smirked. I can do it all I want. As long as the array is in place or you have that kunai in your arm, you can't do anything about. In one quick move, Naruto yanked the sword down, severing the arm from his body. He funneled all of the chakra into the spot, and watched in mild satisfaction as the bone slowly began to grow back. Okay, try to do it now. Yugito growled. I still have the array. I just have to throw a kunai at you to get it to work. Naruto smirked in satisfaction as Yugito activated the jutsu again, then threw 3 spare kunai at him. The bolt to lightning exploded into the metal, racing through the array and into the 3 kunai, creating a web of electricity which raced straight towards him. There was a massive explosion of smoke, and Yugito smiled and began to walk away. Where are you going? Naruto asked from the smoke. You lost, Naruto. Give it up. The blonde laughed as the smoke began to clear. Your attack didn't hit Yugito. The smoke is from me summoning my 10 newest puppets all together. Yugito's eyes widened as the smoke completely cleared. Standing in front of her were 10 giant dragons, each with a symbol for a specific element on its chest. 2 of them were activated, which was shown by their eyes glowing brightly. One was a giant black dragon, with spikes on its shoulders, back and head. Its stomach and the bottom of the neck were both yellow. Set into the center of its chest was a purple jewel. Its wings were medium-sized, with a leathery composition. The 4 claws on each paw were long and ivory-colored. Set in the center of its head was the symbol for lightning. The second dragon was larger, standing on its 2 back feet. It was gold-plated, with a long tail that had spikes running down it. The plating covering the body was heavy, and instead of the normal type of wings, it had 2 sets of giant, wicked-looking blades attached to it. Set in the center of its forehead was the symbol for metal. The dragons around it ranged in different shapes and sizes, and each controlled one of the 10 elements. The dragon for Earth was a massive, heavily built creature, with stone-colored plating, and golden spikes shooting out of its back. Each claw was the same golden color as the spikes shooting from its back. Leaking from the puppet's mouth and 3 holes on each side of its neck was magma, which stirred around, ready to be used. A tree was growing out of its back, adding a strange touch of serenity to the monstrous creation. The fire dragon was on all 4s as well, but smaller than the earth dragon. It was completely red, the color of fire, and had spikes shooting out of its head. The underbelly was white, and instead of normal wings, the dragons were made of actual flames. As it spread its wings, fire spread down its back, neck, and tail, and a stream flowed out of its mouth into the air. The ice dragon was made the color of ice. It had a nasty-looking head, and its wings looked like bats. Its tail had a large spike on the end of it, and spikes raced up from the bottom of the neck to the tip of the tail. It snorted, and a blast of liquid nitrogen froze the grass beneath it. The lava dragon looked like it was made of stone, with each piece of its tail segmented and spikes covering part of its neck. Lava seeped from within its body, and as the eyes began to glow, the molten rock flowed around the dragon, at Naruto's whim. The sand dragon was brown, with a gold underbelly. Its wings had spikes segmenting the golden leathery pieces, and blades extended from the bottom of these. Each of the teeth, claws, and blades, unlike on the other dragons, looked like metal. Spikes decorated its neck and spearhead-like columns of scales decorated the arch of each wing. The water dragon was the color of the ocean. Instead of spikes, it had fins coming down from the arms and a protrusion at the back of its head. Its tail was the longest of them all, and had tiny fins on it. In its hand was a wicked-looking sword, and each of its claws was carved from a rock the same color as the ocean. The wind dragon was bright green, with long flaps for wings. It had a set of vicious claws and teeth, and was heavily plated. White spikes covered its tail on the top and slightly on the bottom. Wind chakra danced over its purple claws, creating miniature tornadoes. The wood dragon was the most terrifying. It was tethered by chains, with its wings spread out. Spikes covered it at random areas, and it was obvious by the roots shooting up around it that it wanted loose. It had 2 claws on each paw, and they were covered in blood. Naruto smirked at all the shocked looks from around the area. This is my construct that I have been working on with massive amounts of clones to create. I went through several fortunes to get the parts and seals and paper for the construction and design. I fell asleep with chakra exhaustion many nights after summoning clones to work on it. But this is only one of its 2 forms. The other is a combination of these 10 puppets. But enough of this. Chakra strings shot out from his back, connecting to each puppet and bringing them to life. He withdrew the strings from his fingers that were attached to his metal and lightning dragons as new one attached. It's time to finsa this. Dragon Series, COMMENSE attack. Cliffhanger Jutsu, aka author's notes. So now you know one piece of the puzzle. Next chapter, Orochimaru make his move, and we finally see what the combined form of the dragon series is. The pictures of each dragon are on my photo bucket. I'm putting a link to it on my profile, near the top.